So let's talk about the file and the file list and the file reader API. We've already looked at this in a slight detail and it's not too complex. We essentially have a file object, which then gives us some information about a local file on our system. We can then process it, upload it, and do whatever we like with it. Now, in this lesson, what we're going to start building out is the capability to upload these files. So we're in fact going to create a function called handle file upload. And then we're going to just simply pass in those files, which will then essentially encapsulate the logic to handle the upload. So what we can do, below our drop zone event listener, we can create the constant for the handle the file upload. This then gives us the files, and inside the body of the function, we can then do something with our files. Now, because this is a file list, it kind of acts like an array, so we can iterate over it nicely. Now, I say it kind of acts like an array. It's not an array. So if we were to console log our files object, go into our drag and drop editor, drop a few files in, you can see that we have this file list, but it doesn't have any array prototype methods that we might want to use. Now, because these particular files are JPEGs, we might want to, in fact, restrict specific file types. So what I'm going to do is jump up the top, create a p tag, and inside we're going to say to the user that we accept only .png, .jpg, and .svg. So PNG files, JPEGs, as well as SVGs. We can save this out, and this is looking quite nice. Accepts only PNG, JPEG, and SVGs. So if we drag in a recording file, at the moment this is actually being let through. So what we want to do is learn how to restrict this. We don't want to just let any random file types through. This could then crash our server backend or you name it. Now, what I would typically do here is use a functional programming style and then use an array filter to then filter out the files which aren't essentially valid. So what we could do is create a new function saying const is it an allowed type. This is then going to simply accept each individual file and then return us the value. So we can say return, and what we want to look at for this is the file type. If you remember, each individual file down inside of here has this type, and you can see that this is actually blank because it's not really recognized. It's not a standard type. Whereas if we drop a JPEG in, you can see that our file then has image/JPEG as the actual file type. So with that in mind, what we want to do is create a list of allowed types. So you might want to do this another way, but I'm just simply going to use an array includes. So because we are using PNGs, JPEGs, and it's important to remember that if you look, the JPEG here actually has an E in it, despite the file name or the file extension not. So we need to say image/PNG, image/JPEG with the E, and then image/SVG. Now SVG is actually XML based, so we need to put plus XML. We could, as this is just going to be a simple function, turn this into more of a lambda style expression, which is just a nice one-liner. So we can pass each individual file, and then we can run this check. Does this file type exist inside this array? If so, we can let it through. Otherwise, we're going to completely abandon. Now, what you might want to do is do something like .filter. However, when we hit save, we're then going to see a nice big red error in our console. And this is because files.filter is not a function. It is not an array prototype, which means that we could use something like array.from if we wanted. We could say create a new array from our files. We can then select those files, drag them in, and we have an array. And of course, both of those files exist. However, one thing that I like to use is the spread operator. It's quite nice and readable, and it's a little bit shorter. It doesn't involve any function calls. So we'll save this out. What I'm going to do is drag in our recording file, and you can see that our array is still empty. Now, if I drag in 3 files, you can see I have 1, 2, and 3. This is then going to give us 2 items in that array, only the valid files. So it depends how you want to handle invalid file formats, but this is quite a nice way to do things by using an array filter. So we could then say the files that we want to upload is going to be the result of calling our array.filter. This then gives us the files that we want to then upload. At this point, we then have a list of valid files that we can then go and create preview images for and then pass them off to the server as well. So that's it for this lesson. A nice, quick and easy one. that will allow us to restrict specific file types, and we've easily demonstrated an invalid file type. And what happens when we drag 2 valid and 1 invalid, it gets silently handled behind the scenes. It's up to you whether you want to perhaps loop through them, alert the user, or show some kind of message to them that they've uploaded an invalid type. But I'm just skipping that, and we're just simply going to pass them off to a server momentarily. So that's it for this lesson. We've learned how to handle some kind of restricting. We've looked at these file objects, and we've then looked at this type property. And of course, the type doesn't actually exist on some of our file types if they are non-standard. So it's good for us to check these as well. We could, of course, look at something like the size. If we were to implement a particular file size and say we want to restrict it to a certain number of bytes. And of course, our size is 24,373 bytes for this particular image. And I'll leave it to you if you want to go and implement something like that and restrict based on the bytes. So that's it for this lesson. Let's dive into the next one.